Sequences is one of the most important topic in IGCSE and one of the topics students get confused even though it is pretty simplistic. In this video we'll go through the basics of sequences, try to get an intro, and then in the next video we'll go through the hard part. So first of all we need to understand why do we need, what are sequences used for. Let's say you have a very straightforward sequence. Let's say you have a sequence 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Well, I don't need to know any mathematics to predict that the next two terms would probably be 12, 14. It doesn't require any high level knowledge. However, these are pretty simple sequences. When I talk about sequences in real life, I'm talking about house prices, I'm talking about population and other more advanced sequences. So understanding sequences is important. The reason is, by understanding sequences, we can extrapolate the future. Now here I have a simple example of population of a random country. Now let's say for the first 5 years, we know that the population has increased by, let's say, 10 million, suppose. Now I have drawn a curve using the data for the past 5 years of the population of this given country. Now because of the shape of the graph, I could look at it and I could say, hey, the graph seems to be going upwards, so it makes logical sense, and then in the next 5 years it will probably go upward. This is a way of extrapolating future. Once we get this first sequence of how the population is growing, and if we can construct a graph, we can then create our formulas for the sequence and then have our own extrapolation. Why is that important? That is important firstly because it helps us plan. It helps us plan cities, helps us plan development. It helps us plan for the infrastructure needed for the future. And there could be many other reasons why sequences, by extrapolating the future, we can predict, we can help ourselves at present. This is mostly used in, first of all, in economics. In economics, it's all about sequences. It's all about predicting the future. It's all about extrapolating the future. Almost all businesses try to extrapolate their earnings for the coming year or for the next quarter so that they can then plan in advance for that. It is also used in urban development of cities. We try to understand about understanding, and by studying sequences of how the city is growing and how the population is growing, we can predict what the population would look like in the next 10 years and therefore plan the city accordingly. It is also used in industries where we try to run, especially in industries of mass production, where you're trying to have every single component, every single machine working at a precise sequence so that everything works out properly. Now obviously this intro you don't need for your examination, is pretty unnecessary, but I give it just so that you guys understand that sequences, although they may sound pretty straightforward, unnecessary, but they are important in real life. Sequences and calculus. Most students, especially in A levels, look at it at first and say, hey, why do you have to study this in detail? Doesn't really make much sense. What's the use in real life? But they are extremely important. So what do you actually need for your exam? You need to study different type of sequences. In life, there are a bunch of different types of sequences that we know. Obviously, each sequence for something specific is different. You can't have a general description of all the sequences, but here are some general description of different types of sequences we generally find in nature. In your examination for IGCSE, you need to know about linear sequence. Linear sequence is also known as arithmetic sequence. I hope my spelling is correct. Arithmetic sequence, quadratic sequence, and cubic sequence. Now, quadratic and cubic sequence, both of these are rare. You get them in the exams in paper 4, but they are not that common. They are rare. These other sequences, geometric sequences and Fibonacci sequence, harmonic sequence, you will study them in A levels. Harmonic sequence, I don't think you study in IGCSE at all, but the other two you will study in your A levels. In this video, we'll go through the linear sequence. In the next video, we'll go through the quadratic and cubic sequence. Now, you guys need to understand that regardless of the sequence, regardless whether it's a linear sequence, quadratic sequence, cubic sequence, regardless of the type of sequence, the most important thing when you have questions related to sequence is by finding out the nth term formula. Nth term essentially means, turns. So let's say you have a simple sequence 2, 4, 6, 8. In this case, this is the first term, this is the second term, this is the third term, this is the fourth term, so on and so forth. Nth term means basically it's a variable. Now, lots of students get confused. They think nth term is a specific number, it's a specific thing. No, n is simply a variable. It's simply a variable of, first, second, third, fourth, whichever the term is. So if I want to find the 100th term, n would be 100. If I want to find 200th term, n would be 200. It's simply a variable used to denote which term are we talking about. So by finding the nth term formula means the formula of this sequence, where I just have a simple formula where I'll plug in my value of the term first, second or third and get the answer for that. That's the meaning of nth term formula. This is the most crucial thing that you need to know for exam. How do you calculate the nth term formula? Almost all your questions in the exam, one way or the other, directly or indirectly, will be related to this. So once you can figure this out, the rest of the questions will be very similar. In the next video, I'll go through the type of questions you get in your examination related to sequences. So first, let's get on with linear sequence or arithmetic sequence. A basic explanation, a basic definition could be linear sequences. Okay, a little bit of magic trick. Linear sequences are always added or subtracted by a constant term. Either you're in each term, either you're adding something or you're subtracting something constantly. Let's take a simple example. Let's say you have a term 0, -2, -4, -6, so on and so forth. We are subtracting 2 in each term as we go along. 2 is the constant subtraction in each term. So you need to understand that linear sequences are always in the formula, are always in the format of a n plus c, where c is your constant and a is your difference. Let me just write d instead of a. I guess that's more relevant. Again, these are variables. You can have z, you can have y, it doesn't really matter. It's just a formula. So let's just call it d. This d means your difference. This is d. This is your difference in each term. Linear sequence always in the form dn plus c. So in this specific scenario, -2 is the constant difference. So our formula will look something like this: -2n plus c. We need to find the value of c. Now, if I look at the term 0, -2, -4, -6, I know that the first term, the answer for the first term is 0. So if I make my n to be 1, representing the first term, if I make my n to be 1, I know that this should give us the value 0, because the first term is 0. So the formula, if I plug in, the first term should give us 0 because the first term is 0. By using this linear equation, I can then figure out the value of c. So by doing a bit of algebra, so -2 into +1 is -2 plus c is equal to 0. C equals to +2. So our nth term formula is -2n plus 2 that's your nth term formula, is equal to nth term. Again, nth term is just a variable used to represent the term. Which term are we talking about? First, second, third, fourth. So let's just try this out. So I know that my fourth term is -6. So if I plug in 4 in place of my n to figure out fourth term, I should get -6. -2 into 4 is -8 plus 2. -8 plus 2 is, of course, -6. And you can then use this to find any term you like. Now, in your examination, what type of questions do you get? I'll go through quadratic and cubic sequence in the next video, but let me just go through what type of question do you get in the exam, and why is knowing the nth term the most crucial thing. In your exam, what you will usually get? First of all, you will usually get questions where they'll ask you to predict the next two term. For example, you have a sequence over here, and predict the next two terms. You just have to write the next 2 or 3 terms. That's the first and very basic type of questions you get probably in your paper number 2. Then the second type of questions you get is finding the nth term formula, which again, if you use this is simple technique, you should be able to get it. It doesn't look that difficult. The third most common type of questions you get is they'll give you the answer to the term, but they'll not tell you which term it is. For example, they would simply say, look, for this question, let's say for this question, let's say they are saying that the one of the term is minus, let's say 20. They'll ask you in the exam, which term is this? In that scenario, first you'll have to figure out your formula, figure out your nth term formula. And once you have figured out your nth term formula, 2n plus 2 is equal to minus 20. And then you have to simply solve for n. So minus 2n is equal to minus 20 minus 2, n is equal to n is equal to 20, and n is equal to minus 22 divided by 2 minus 2, n is equal to 11. That's your answer right there. Again, you will notice that in these type of questions is the most important thing to do is finding the nth term formula. The fourth type of questions is you will get are usually simultaneous equation questions. But the general idea is that you will have simultaneous equation question, simultaneous equation. Okay, again, in all these four type of questions that you'll probably get in your exam, at the heart of all of this is finding the nth term formula. Once you can figure that out, everything else, you just have to read properly, understand the question, and the rest is simple algebra, which should not be difficult. Other than that, you really don't need to know much in sequence other than finding the nth term formula and know a little bit of algebra. You don't really need to know that much in sequences. If you can do that, you're golden. This is probably one of the confusing topics students have in their exam. They don't really understand how to tackle them, but they tend to be pretty simple as long as you can figure out a way to find the nth term formula. You guys understand.